You are going to die. It is the only absolute certainty we share, the one event that connects every king, every pauper, and every star in the night sky. We treat death as the ultimate ending, the full stop at the end of a long and complicated sentence. We imagine a switch being flipped, a light going out, and a sudden violent transition into a state called nothingness. But if you spent half a century peering into the fundamental equations of reality, the math that governs black holes, quantum fields, and the birth of time itself, you would notice something deeply unsettling. You would find that in the entire history of science, across every page of every physics textbook ever written, there is not a single law that describes how something stops existing. Not one. Every equation we have, from the motion of a falling stone to the vibration of an electron, describes transformation, evolution, and change. But not a single one contains a delete function. The universe, at its most fundamental level, lacks the capacity for erasure. This is the terrifying truth that physics whispers while biology screams. You are a feature of the universe's geometry, and the universe has no command for ontological deletion. Tonight, we aren't looking for comfort or spiritual reassurance. We are looking at the cold, hard code of the cosmos to understand why the end you've spent your life fearing might be a mathematical impossibility. You've lived your entire life under a profound misunderstanding. We look at the world and see things that begin and things that end. A glass falls and shatters. We say the glass is gone. A fire burns out. We say the flame has died. A person stops breathing. We say they have ceased to exist. This is our folk model of reality, a narrative of creation and destruction. But physics doesn't recognize that narrative. If you were to take the most sophisticated computer on Earth and try to write a physics simulation of the universe, you would have functions for gravity, functions for electromagnetism, and functions for the way particles dance in the dark. But you would find yourself unable to write a remove from existence operator. The math simply doesn't have that symbol. In the language of the universe, there is no such thing as an ending. There is only a redistribution of coordinates. Think about the sheer audacity of that statement. We are taught that conservation of energy is a basic rule. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, but we rarely sit with the horror of what that actually means for our identity. Every joule of energy that constitutes you, the chemical energy in your cells, the electrical signals firing across your neurons right now, the thermal heat radiating from your skin, has existed since the dawn of time and will exist until the universe breathes its last. When you die, that energy doesn't check out of the universe's ledger. It simply changes its address. It becomes heat in the soil, chemical energy in the roots of a tree, or kinetic energy in the air. But there is a deeper, more haunting level to this. Modern physics has been embroiled in a decades-long war over something even more fundamental than energy: information. In physics, information isn't just data or facts. It is the specific arrangement of every atom, the precise configuration of every electron, and the unique correlations that make you you. For years, the greatest minds, including Stephen Hawking, believed that if you fell into a black hole, the most efficient crusher in the cosmos, your information would be deleted from reality. It was called the black hole information paradox, and it nearly broke physics because if even a single bit of information could be deleted, the entire structure of quantum mechanics would collapse. But after 30 years of intellectual combat, the consensus shifted. Information is never lost. Not even in a black hole. It gets scrambled, it gets encrypted, it gets hidden in the subtle quantum correlations of the vacuum, but it is never, ever deleted. If the universe refuses to lose a single bit of data from a black hole, why would it treat your brain any differently? This leads us to the first massive mystery that most documentaries are too afraid to touch: the concept of informational scar tissue in the vacuum. We often think of space as an empty container, but general relativity tells us space is a physical fabric, a geometry. You are not in space. You are a feature of its geometry. Every interaction you have, every path you walk, and every thought you think is a coordinate embedded in that four-dimensional manifold. When you die, your biological process stops, but the scar you left on the geometry of the vacuum remains. The vacuum is not empty. It is a perfect encryption system that holds the record of your existence in a state of physical permanence. This brings us to the illegal operation. In any other system, an illegal operation is a command that the hardware cannot execute. For the universe, the command to stop being part of the inventory is that illegal operation. We experience death as a transition from something to nothing. But physics doesn't recognize a substance called nothingness. It only describes change. We are like a whirlpool in a river. The whirlpool looks like a solid, independent object. You can point to it. You can see its boundaries. But the whirlpool is not the water. It is a pattern of motion. If the flow of the river stops, the whirlpool disappears, but the water doesn't go anywhere. The you that you experience is the pattern of the whirlpool, a complex, low-entropy arrangement of information processing that is constantly being updated. The terror of death comes from our obsession with the inside view, the internal theater of consciousness. We are terrified that when the architecture of the brain dissolves, the performance stops. And physics, in its most honest form, admits that it has no variable for you in its equations. You will find mass, spin, charge, and probability amplitude in a textbook, but you will never find subject or identity. This is the identity gap. If you aren't the atoms, which are replaced every 7 years, and you aren't the energy, which is just borrowed stardust, then what are you? You are the pattern. And here is where the deeper mystery of the causal bridge comes into play. We've all heard of Poincaré recurrence, the idea that in an infinite universe with finite resources, the particles will eventually reassemble into your exact configuration again. But most physicists dismiss this as a mere copy, a replica that lacks a causal connection to you. They say the bridge is broken because time only moves one way. But is it? If the universe is a block universe, a static four-dimensional loaf of bread where every moment of your life exists simultaneously and eternally, then past and present are just coordinate labels, not fundamental truths. Einstein himself, in his final days, wrote that the distinction between past, present, and future is nothing more than a stubbornly persistent illusion. In this block universe, the causal bridge isn't broken. It is simply part of the geometry that we can't see. Your birth isn't an event that happened and then vanished. It is a point in the structure. Your death is just another point. Neither is more real than the other. The road of your life has a beginning and an end, but the end of a road doesn't mean the road ceases to exist. It just means you've reached the boundary of the structure. This leads us to a possibility that is far more terrifying than simple non-existence, the idea of a mathematical asymptote at the final second of life. If time is a dimension and our perception of it is a product of our brain's internal clock, what happens when that clock begins to malfunction in the final moments? We know from modern neuroscience that in the seconds following clinical death, the brain often experiences a massive surge of coordinated electrical activity, a final, desperate attempt to maintain the pattern. In those moments, your subjective perception of time might dilate. As the brain's coherence breaks down, the last second might stretch toward a mathematical infinity. From the outside, you are gone in a heartbeat. From the inside, you might be trapped in the final page of the book for an eternity, experiencing a timeless now that the physics of the block universe says was always there, waiting for you. The terrifying truth isn't that you are deleted. It's that you are indelible. You are a permanent record in a system that does not have a shredder. You are being smeared across the vacuum of space, your information encoded in the very fabric of reality. We spend our lives running away from the void, but physics tells us the void doesn't exist. What we are actually running toward is a state of total, irreversible entanglement, a transformation so complex that you cease to be a localized person and become a non-local feature of the entire cosmos. You don't die, you decohere, you dissolve into the static. But in a universe that conserves every bit of data, every scar on the vacuum, and every coordinate in space-time, the question isn't whether you survive. The question is, what does it feel like to be a pattern that can no longer update itself, yet can never be undone? Look at your hand. It feels solid, dependable, and real. When you press your thumb against your index finger, you feel a resistance that seems absolute, a boundary that says, "Here I begin, and here the world ends." But this sensation, this foundational belief in the solidity of your own body, is perhaps the most successful hallucination the universe has ever performed. If we were to look at you through the lens of fundamental physics, we wouldn't see a person. We would see a ghost. We would see a cathedral of empty space, held together by a microscopic war that never sleeps. You are, quite literally, 99.999% nothing. To understand the terrifying truth about your death, we first have to understand the impossible architecture of your life and why your very existence is a temporary defiance of the vacuum. To visualize the sheer scale of the void inside you, imagine that the nucleus of one of your atoms, the dense core where almost all of your mass lives, is the size of a single marble sitting in the center of a massive football stadium. The outer edge of that atom, the boundary where your electrons dance, would stretch all the way to the highest seats in the furthest bleachers. Everything in between that marble and those seats is a profound, echoing silence. It is an absolute void. If you were to take every human being currently alive on Earth and remove the empty space from their atoms, the entire human race, all 8 billion of us, would fit inside the volume of a single sugar cube. This isn't a metaphor. It is the mathematical reality of your composition. You are a shimmering mist of probability, a localized thickening of the vacuum that has somehow convinced itself it is solid. But if you are made of nothing, why don't you fall through your chair? Why doesn't your hand pass through a table like a phantom moving through a wall? The answer isn't solidity in any sense we understand. It is repulsion. When you touch an object, your atoms never actually make physical contact with the atoms of that object. Instead, the electron clouds of your skin meet the electron clouds of the table, and they push back. You are perpetually hovering, a microscopic fraction of a millimeter above every surface you have ever touched, supported by an invisible cushion of quantum force. You have never actually touched anything in your entire life. You have only ever felt the silent, forceful whisper of electrons refusing to share their space. This refusal is governed by what physicists call the Pauli exclusion principle, the unyielding rule of the cosmos. It is a law of ultimate individuality. In the grand inventory of the universe, particles are divided into 2 great families, the socialites and the loners. The socialites are called bosons, particles like the photons that make up light. Bosons are deeply communal. They don't mind overlapping, merging, or occupying the exact same spot at the exact same time. If the universe were made only of bosons, everything would simply collapse into a single dimensionless point of blinding energy. There would be no structure, no stars, and certainly no you. But you are made of fermions, the loners. Electrons are the most famous members of this individualistic family. The Pauli exclusion principle dictates with mathematical certainty that no 2 electrons in the same system can ever occupy the exact same quantum state at the exact same time. They demand their own unique identity. They are like guests in a microscopic hotel who refuse to share a room. When the bottom floor of an atom is full, the next electron is forced to move to a higher floor, and then the next, building a complex 3-dimensional structure of tiered shells. This outward stacking is the only thing that gives atoms their size and volume. It is the secret of solidity. Your body is a masterpiece of quantum resistance, a billion-year-old dance of particles that insist on holding their space in the vast, ancient dark. This principle is so powerful that its effects aren't limited to your cells. It is the same force that prevents the stars themselves from collapsing. When a star like our sun dies, it shrinks under the crushing weight of its own gravity, squeezing its atoms until they shatter into a dense soup of electrons. Gravity wants to crush that star into a single point, but the electrons stand shoulder to shoulder, refusing to be identical. They push back with something called electron degeneracy pressure. This silent quantum rule is strong enough to hold up the weight of a dead sun. The very same shield that stops your hand from passing through a window is the shield that holds up the ancient, glowing corpses of stars across the cosmos. Now, consider the horror. If solidity is an illusion of quantum repulsion, a microscopic shield generated by the spinningness of trillions of loner particles, then what is death? In the language of the architect of emptiness, death is not the arrival of nothingness. It is the relaxation of the shield. You have spent your entire life as a low-entropy island, an improbably organized fortress maintained by a continuous flow of energy. Your brain and body consume fuel to keep these microscopic loners in their highly specific tiered arrangements. This organization is what allows the pattern of you to persist amidst the void. When you die, the energy supply is cut, and the maintenance crew for your quantum fortress walks off the job. Physics tells us that nothing is deleted, but the structure, the shield, begins to relax. The precise orchestration of your biological chemistry, which evolution perfected over eons, starts to unwind. The bricks of the building, the atoms and the energy, don't disappear. They simply stop being a building. They redistribute. They return to the soil, the water, and the air, becoming part of other structures and other cycles. But the unsettling truth is that you were never the bricks. You were the shield itself. You were the specific way the empty space was organized. In the eyes of the universe, you are a smeared identity. Even now, you are being radiated outward at the speed of light, your information encoded in subtle quantum correlations that the vacuum never forgets. When the shield relaxes, you aren't going into a void. You are simply becoming indistinguishable from the void you were already made of. The nothingness of death is not a destination. It is the fundamental state of your architecture finally reclaiming its original unstructured freedom. The universe doesn't have a delete command because it doesn't need one. It only has rearrange. You are a feature of the universe's geometry, a temporary coordinate in a four-dimensional manifold that refuses to let a single bit of information be lost. But for the inside view, the consciousness that feels the solidity of the hand and the warmth of the sun, this relaxation feels like the ultimate ending. Physics tells us the information is preserved, but it is preserved like the ink of a book that has been shredded and scattered across the surface of a black hole. The data is there, but the story is gone. We are the ashes of an ancient war between matter and its shadowy twins, held together by a rule of exclusion that prevents us from collapsing into light. To be alive is to be a ghost that has learned how to push back against the emptiness. And to die is to finally stop pushing. It is the transition from a dynamic process to a static structure, a world line in the block universe that is finished, but eternally present. You will die, and the shield will relax, but the geometry of the universe will forever bear the informational scar tissue of the moment you were here, a localized thickening of the void that dared to look back at the stars. Think about your relationship with time. To you, it feels like a river, a relentless, unidirectional flow that carries you from a known past into an uncertain future. You feel like you are standing on a tiny, precarious bridge called the present, watching moments approach, vanish under your feet, and then recede forever into the dark. In this model, the past is a graveyard of things that no longer exist, and the future is a void of things that haven't happened yet. Death, in this view, is the moment the river finally sweeps you over a waterfall into nothingness. But if you look at the equations of general relativity, you discover that this river is perhaps the most successful illusion ever played on the human mind. Physics does not see time as a flow. It sees time as a coordinate. Just as left and right or up and down are directions in space, past and future are simply directions in a four-dimensional structure we call space-time. This is the concept of the block universe, or eternalism, the most direct and mathematically consistent interpretation of Einstein's work. In the block universe, the universe is not a three-dimensional stage where things happen over time. It is a static, four-dimensional object, a loaf of bread where every moment that has ever occurred and every moment that will ever occur exists simultaneously and eternally. There is no special now that moves through the loaf. Now is not a fundamental feature of the cosmos. It is merely a feature of your reference frame, no more special than the here where you are currently standing. Imagine this loaf of space-time. Every slice of the bread represents the entire universe at one specific moment. There is a slice for the day the pyramids were completed. There is a slice for the day you took your first breath. There is a slice for this very second as you listen to my voice. And there is a slice for the final moment of your life. Crucially, the slices of the past do not disappear simply because you have moved past them, any more than the city you left behind on a road trip disappears once it is out of your rearview mirror. The geometry of the universe does not have a past shelf and a future shelf. It simply contains all coordinates at once. This leads us to a radical redefinition of what you actually are. In our daily lives, we think of ourselves as three-dimensional beings moving through time. But in the four-dimensional manifold of physics, you are not a traveler. You are a world line. You are a continuous, static geometric object that stretches from your birth to your death. If you could stand outside the loaf of space-time and look in, you wouldn't see a person doing things. You would see a long, shimmering, four-dimensional sculpture, a solid thread woven into the fabric of the cosmos. Your 10-year-old self is not gone. That version of you is a permanent coordinate in the geometry of the universe, sitting in a specific slice of the loaf, experiencing that moment with exactly the same reality and intensity that you feel right now. The physics is quietly devastating. Those moments are not memories, they are locations. This is what we call the block universe prison, but it is a prison that offers a terrifying kind of permanence. If your life is a static sculpture, then death is not the destruction of that sculpture. It is simply its boundary. We treat death as a transition into nothingness, but in geometry, a boundary does not cause the structure it bounds to vanish. The end of a road does not unmake the miles you traveled to get there. The edge of a continent does not mean the land behind it is a lie. Think of a book. As you read it, you experience the story word by word, page by page. To you, the reader, the earlier chapters feel like the past, and the unread pages feel like the future. But the book itself exists as a whole, complete object. Every word on every page is equally real and present, whether you are currently looking at it or not. Death is merely the final slice, the last page of your book. The existence of that last page does not diminish the existence of any other page. The book doesn't vanish when you close the cover. The story is simply finished. It is a dynamic process that has transitioned into a static structure. This isn't just a comforting metaphor. It was the technical reality that Albert Einstein used to process his own grief. In 1955, just weeks before his own death, Einstein wrote a letter to the family of his oldest friend, Michel Besso, who had just passed away. Einstein didn't offer spiritual platitudes. He spoke as a physicist. He wrote that Besso had preceded him by a little, but that this meant nothing, because for those of us who believe in physics, The distinction between past, present, and future, however stubbornly persistent, is an illusion. Einstein wasn't speaking loosely. He was stating that Besso's death was not a deletion from the inventory of reality. It was a relocation in a structure that does not delete. He was asserting that the moments he and Besso spent arguing and thinking together were permanent geometric features of the universe, coexisting eternally with the moment of Besso's final breath. But this raises the central haunting question. If we are static sculptures in an eternal loaf, why do we feel like we are moving? Why is our consciousness trapped in a single slice, unable to see the whole loaf at once? This is the frozen river paradox. Physics can describe the structure of the loaf, but it cannot explain why you experience time as a flow. It cannot tell us why your awareness is localized to a particular coordinate and not aware of the entire 4D structure simultaneously. This is the hard problem of consciousness intersecting with the geometry of the vacuum. Some suggest that each moment of your consciousness exists independently in its own slice, each version of you aware only of its own present, unaware that the version of you 10 years ago and the version of you 10 years from now are equally conscious and real in their own coordinates. The terrifying truth of the block universe is that you will never be more or less real than you are at this exact second. You have always existed in these coordinates, and you will always exist in them. Your death is real, but so is your life, and in the language of the equations, both are equally and eternally present. You are a 4D sculpture that the universe refuses to let go of. You are a permanent record in a system that lacks a shredder. When you reach the final slice, the trajectory of your world line simply ends. You don't go anywhere. You are just a completed object in a manifold. The universe does not erase your life when it ends. It retains it as geometry. You will die, but you will also have always lived. The terrifying part isn't the end. It's the realization that every mistake, every joy, and every second of pain is a permanent, indelible coordinate in the architecture of reality. The universe is a frozen river, and you are the ice, locked forever into a masterpiece of empty space and probability that can never be undone. If we want to understand the terrifying permanence of your death, we have to look away from the hospital bed and toward the most violent, efficient shredders in the known universe: black holes. For decades, a quiet war was fought in the halls of theoretical physics, a conflict not over territory or resources, but over a single devastating question: is the universe capable of forgetting you? This was the black hole information paradox, a 30-year intellectual battle between Stephen Hawking and Leonard Susskind that nearly broke the foundations of science. And while it might seem like a distant, abstract debate about celestial objects millions of light years away, the resolution of this war provides the ultimate physical proof that your death is not a deletion, but an encryption. To understand the stakes, we first have to meet the monster. A black hole is a region of space-time where gravity is so intense that the escape velocity exceeds the speed of light. Once anything crosses that invisible boundary, the event horizon, it is traditionally thought to be gone from the external universe forever. In the 1970s, Stephen Hawking published a calculation that sent a shockwave through the scientific community. He discovered that black holes aren't actually black. They slowly leak a faint random glow called Hawking radiation. Because this radiation appeared to be purely thermal and random, Hawking argued that as a black hole evaporates and eventually vanishes, everything that ever fell into it, every atom, every book, every person, is erased from the inventory of reality. He was claiming that the universe has a delete button. For Leonard Susskind and his colleagues, this wasn't just a curiosity, it was an existential threat to the laws of nature. If Hawking was right, if a single bit of information could truly be destroyed, then the entire structure of quantum mechanics would collapse. This brings us to the master rule of the quantum world: unitarity. Unitarity is the mathematical requirement that the universe must be reversible. It is the ultimate law of memory. It states that if you know the exact state of the universe right now, you can, in principle, run the equations backward to reconstruct every single second of the past with perfect fidelity. The universe is a perfect bookkeeper. If Hawking could find even one instance of information being deleted, the books wouldn't balance, and the logic of the cosmos would be replaced by pure, unmitigated chaos. The battle lasted for 30 years, and it was technically brutal. But eventually the consensus shifted, and Hawking himself conceded the war in 2004. The resolution came through something called the holographic principle. Physicists realized that as you fall toward a black hole, the information of your existence, the specific arrangement of every subatomic particle in your body, doesn't just vanish into the singularity. Instead, it is smeared across the event horizon, encoded on the two-dimensional surface of the black hole like a hologram. When the black hole evaporates, that information isn't lost. It is carried away in the Hawking radiation, encoded in extraordinarily subtle quantum correlations between the particles. This is the terrifying truth that changes everything for you. If a black hole, the most extreme physics-defying crusher in the universe, cannot perform the operation of delete, then what chance does a simple biological death have? We treat the decomposition of the human brain as a final ending, but in the language of physics, the rotting of a body and the evaporation of a black hole are functionally identical processes. They are both scrambling events. Think about a book thrown into a fireplace. As the paper turns to ash and the ink turns to smoke, we say the book is destroyed. But to a physicist, that is an illusion born of human limitation. The information in the book, the specific position of every ink molecule, and the thermal vibrations of the fire is still present in the room. It has been scrambled, yes. It has been redistributed across trillions of degrees of freedom in the air and the soot. But it is not deleted. In principle, if you had a powerful enough computer and a complete map of every molecule in that room, you could reconstruct the text of the book perfectly. Your death is that fireplace. Your brain is a highly organized, low-entropy information processing system. When the internal engine of life stops, that information doesn't check out of reality. It begins to leak. The electrical signals of your final thoughts, the quantum signatures of your memories, and the structural arrangement of your neurons are smeared into the environment. You are being encrypted into the soil, the atmosphere, and the thermal radiation of the planet. The universe is taking the book of your life, shredding it into 1 billion pieces, and scattering it across the cosmos. But it is meticulously saving every single piece. This is the identity gap that we identified earlier. Unitarity guarantees that the data of your existence is preserved forever in the quantum state of the universe. But the integration, the specific architecture that allowed you to experience that data as a self, is what dissolves. You are like a symphony that has finished its performance. The notes, the information, still exist as vibrations in the walls and the air, encoded in the environment forever. But the symphony, as an active, unfolding event, is over. The universe doesn't lose the notes, but it stops playing the song. This is why physics provides a terrifying answer. It tells us that we are indelible, but unreadable. You are a secret the universe keeps from itself. You are encrypted into a language so complex that it would require the resources of an infinite observer to decode you. Your first kiss, your deepest fear, and your final breath are all being radiated into the dark at 186,000 miles per second, woven into the subtle quantum correlations of the vacuum. The black hole war proved that the universe lacks a shredder. It only has a library with an infinite number of shelves and a filing system that is increasingly difficult to navigate. When you die, you aren't leaving the library. You are just being moved to a different section, one where the text is so fragmented and the ink is so diffuse that no human perspective can ever find you again. You will die, and the universe will remember every bit of it, forever, whether you are there to witness the record or not. We have reached the point in our journey where we must confront the most persistent lie your senses have ever told you, the lie that you are a localized, contained individual. You think of yourself as a solid object standing in a room, a collection of matter with a defined boundary where your skin meets the air. But the physics of information conservation tells a far more haunting and expansive story. In the eyes of the cosmos, you are not a singular point. You are a broadcast. You are currently being smeared across the entire history and future of space-time, encoded in a language of quantum correlations that the universe, by its very laws, is forbidden to forget. To understand this, we have to look at the scrambling versus deletion paradox, the technical reason why the ending you fear is an operation the universe simply cannot execute. Most people imagine death as a cosmic shredder. You put a document into a shredder and it comes out in 1,000 tiny strips. We say the document is destroyed, but a sufficiently patient person with enough tape could, in principle, put it back together because the information on those strips hasn't been deleted. Physics goes one step further. It tells us that even if you were to take that document and burn it to ash, the information, the specific ink molecules, the pattern of the letters, the heat of the fire, is still present, scattered into the smoke, the light, and the molecular vibrations of the air. This is the principle of unitarity, the master rule of the quantum world, which states that the total information content of a system is always conserved. The universe is a perfect bookkeeper, and it never, ever loses a bit. This creates the scrambling paradox. We confuse scrambled with gone because our human brains are too limited to see the pattern once it becomes sufficiently complex. When you die, the pattern that was your brain doesn't vanish into a void. Instead, it undergoes a process of total, irreversible entanglement with its environment. The information of your consciousness, your memories, and your physical form begins to leak out into the room, the soil, and the atmosphere. You are being encrypted into the vacuum. The information isn't being deleted, it is being smeared across so many different particles and degrees of freedom that it becomes, for all practical purposes, invisible to us. But to the universe, the you of 5 minutes ago and the you of 1,000 years from now are equally present in the math. Consider the physical reality of your first kiss. In your mind, it's a fading memory, a chemical ghost in your hippocampus. But in the language of physics, that moment was an event of massive informational density. As it happened, your body was radiating infrared photons into the environment. Those photons, carrying the specific thermal and quantum signature of that exact second, didn't just stop. They moved at the speed of light away from you. They are currently a thin, expanding shell of light, trillions of miles away, heading toward the deep reaches of interstellar space. The physical record of that kiss is a literal, radiating wave propagating through the cosmos. It is not a memory. It is a physical coordinate in the structure of reality. This applies to your final breath just as surely as your first. As the electrical coherence of your brain begins to fade, that final surge of energy isn't an ending, but a final broadcast. The specific quantum correlations of your neural state at that moment are being smudged into the photons and heat of the room. You are becoming non-local. Most documentaries tell you that you become the grass or become the stars in a poetic sense, but physics says you become the vacuum in a structural sense. Your information is being encoded onto the boundary of space itself, a phenomenon described by the holographic principle. This principle suggests that the entire three-dimensional history of a volume of space, including everything that ever lived inside it, is perfectly preserved on its two-dimensional surface area. You are an indelible scar on the geometry of the universe. This leads to the most unsettling part of the smeared identity, the realization that you are already doing this right now. You aren't waiting for death to be dispersed. You are constantly leaking information into the cosmos. Every conversation you have, every photon that bounces off your skin, and every thought that causes a neuron to fire entangles you more deeply with the universe. We think of ourself as a localized pilot sitting inside a biological machine, but physics suggests the self is more like a symphony that has already begun to echo through every corner of the auditorium. You are a four-dimensional world line that is currently being integrated into the total quantum state of the environment. The scaring of the vacuum is a consequence of how black holes treat information, a hard-won realization from the black hole war between Leonard Susskind and Stephen Hawking. Hawking originally thought that information could be truly deleted when a black hole evaporated. But Susskind proved that even in the most violent crusher in the universe, the information of what fell in is preserved in the Hawking radiation. If a black hole, with all its infinite gravity and crushing power, cannot perform the operation of delete, what hope does a simple biological death have? You are much more durable than a black hole. Your informational signature is so deeply woven into the quantum fabric that it would require the destruction of the laws of physics themselves to erase you. So, why does death feel like an ending if we are physically indelible? The answer lies in the identity gap. Physics is a perfect clerk for the stuff, the information, but it has no variable for the story, the conscious perspective. When your brain stops, the integrated pattern that allows you to experience the world line from the inside dissolves. The pieces of the puzzle are all there, preserved eternally in the vacuum, but the person who can put the puzzle together is the one who stops functioning. This is the horror of the smeared identity. You never go away, but you become a pattern so complex and distributed that you can no longer witness yourself. Imagine a beautiful piece of music being played. When the music stops, the sound doesn't cease to exist. The vibrations continue to move through the walls, the air, and eventually the furniture. The information of the melody is still present in the environment, encoded in the molecular movements of the room. But the hearing of the melody requires a listener. Death is the moment the universe stops hearing you as a localized melody and begins to store you as a cosmic vibration. You are being written into the background noise of reality. Every high-retention moment of your life, the terror of a near miss on the highway, the quiet peace of a rainy afternoon, the intensity of your final second, is currently radiating away from Earth at the speed of light. If an observer were standing 100 light-years away with a powerful enough telescope, they could watch your great-grandparents being born. From their perspective, your ancestors are not dead. They are currently, physically happening. The smearing across space-time means that distance is just a delay, not a deletion. Your life is not a fleeting spark, but a permanent, expanding flash of light that the universe can never pull back. This is the terrifying truth physics offers us. We are trapped in our own permanence. We want to believe that when we are done, the record is wiped clean, and we are granted the mercy of non-existence. But the universe doesn't have a shredder. It only has a library. Every bit of information that constitutes you is currently being archived in the subtle quantum correlations of the vacuum. You are an eternal feature of the geometry, a broadcast that will continue to drift through the dark long after the stars themselves have gone cold. You are the information the universe refuses to lose, a smeared identity that began with a first kiss and will never truly find its final breath. From the outside, tracking the movement of atoms, the curvature of space-time, and the immutable laws of information conservation. But now, we have to confront the most unsettling silence in all of science. It is a silence that resides at the very center of your being. We call it the inside view. If you were to open any physics textbook ever written, from the most basic introductory manual to the most advanced treatises on quantum field theory, you would find a meticulously detailed inventory of reality. You would find variables for mass, spin, and charge. You would find complex operators for probability amplitudes, the metric tensor of spacetime, and the rise of entropy. But you could search every page, every footnote, and every index of every volume in the history of science, and you would never find a variable for you. There is no term in any equation that corresponds to the self, the subject, or the observer who is actually experiencing this moment. This is the identity gap, the chasm between the physical score of the universe and the subjective performance we call life. To understand why the internal theater of your mind goes dark while the stage remains perfectly intact, we have to look at what you actually are in the eyes of physics. Our intuition tells us we are objects, contained, solid entities like a chair or a stone. But physics whispers a different truth. You are not an object. You are a process. You are a flowing configuration of matter and energy that is constantly changing while desperately trying to maintain a recognizable pattern. Think of a flame. A flame looks like a thing. You can point to it. You can describe its shape, and you can say, "There it is." But if you try to grab it, you realize there is nothing solid to hold. A flame is a dynamic event of combustion. It is constantly consuming new fuel, releasing new heat, and exchanging every single particle that constitutes it. The flame you see now is not composed of the same atoms it was made of a second ago, and yet we still call it the same flame because the pattern persists. You are that flame. Your body is constantly exchanging its material with the environment in a relentless, silent dance of metabolism. The oxygen you breathed a minute ago is currently participating in your brain chemistry. The food you ate yesterday is becoming your muscle. The heat you are radiating right now is returning to the void. Within a few years, almost every single atom that currently makes up your body will be gone, replaced by new recruits from the world around you. Even the neurons in your brain, the very seat of your memories and identity, are physically different than they were a decade ago. The stuff of you is temporary, but the pattern of you is what we call identity. This leads us to the terrifying realization that identity is tied to the organization of information, not the identity of the atoms themselves. We feel continuous, like the same person we were yesterday, but that continuity is a structural illusion. Physics describes the score, the positions of every particle and the values of every field, but it cannot tell us why that score results in a performance. We can map every wire in the brain, measure every voltage, and understand every chemical component, but we are still left with the hard problem. Why does it feel like something to be that machine? Why is there an internal theater at all, rather than all of that neural computation happening in the dark? This is where the identity gap becomes a crisis of the end. If you are the performance and not the instrument, what happens when the instrument stops? In physical terms, death is not the arrival of nothingness. It is the breakdown of the self-maintaining process. The feedback loops that keep your biological flame stable begin to fail, and the system stops correcting for the inevitable drift of entropy. From the outside, a physicist sees a transition from a highly ordered, far from equilibrium system to a more disordered state. The atoms remain. The electrons don't vanish. The fields don't disappear. The actors are all still standing on the stage, but the script, the integrated self-referential organization, is no longer being read. We must ask, if the actors, the atoms, are still there, why does the theater go dark? The answer lies in the integration problem. Consciousness requires a very specific, active architecture to bind sensory input, memory, and prediction into a unified point of view. While the information of your life might be preserved in the quantum state of the universe, that information is no longer integrated. It is like a broken cup. The atoms of the cup are all present, but the cupness, the functional organized structure, is gone. Your identity is a non-local smeared broadcast, but the receiver is what stops functioning. Physics is a perfect clerk for the universe's inventory, but it is an indifferent audience for its drama. It can tell you that every bit of you is conserved, that your score is written into the geometry of space-time forever, but it cannot tell you if the performance continues once the music stops. This is the most honest statement we can make. Physics describes a universe that refuses to delete your information, yet it remains silent on whether your experience can survive the scattering of that information. The theater goes dark, not because the building is destroyed, but because the process that maintained the light was a dynamic, temporary island of order in a sea of increasing chaos. We are left with a strange, dual reality. In the physical sense, you are an indelible feature of the cosmos, a world line that can never be erased. In the experiential sense, you are a localized melody that eventually dissolves into the background noise of the vacuum. The universe does not have a delete command, but it also does not guarantee that the performance will always have an observer. We are the ashes of an ancient war, organized into a pattern that briefly learned how to witness its own existence. The terrifying truth is that while the universe is structurally incapable of letting you go, it is also currently incapable of telling you why you were here to see it in the first place. The actors remain, the stage is eternal, but the performance is a fleeting, beautiful glitch in the code of the infinite. We have built a cathedral of empty space and static geometry, a four-dimensional loaf of bread where every moment of your life is eternally etched into the fabric of reality. But as we move deeper into the cold, clinical heart of modern physics, we encounter a mystery that is far more intimate and far more unsettling than the mere conservation of your atoms. It is the mystery of the inside view, the realization that the universe you see around you, with its vast galaxies and solid wooden doors, might not exist at all without you there to witness it. This is the realm of the observer effect, a phenomenon that suggests the cosmos is not a finished stage waiting for actors, but a participatory performance that requires a witness to even begin. If reality is a shimmering cloud of probability that only snaps into focus when you look at it, then we must confront a question that science is almost too terrified to ask. What happens to the universe when the observer dies? Or more hauntingly, does the internal logic of the quantum world even allow the observer to reach the end of their own story? To understand the observer's grave, we have to return to the absolute heart of quantum mechanics, the experiment that Richard Feynman called the only mystery of the quantum world. Imagine firing a single electron at a barrier with two slits. As we saw earlier, that electron doesn't move like a tiny marble. It moves as a wave of probability, a smeared-out cloud of potential that passes through both slits simultaneously and interferes with its own ghostly presence. But here is the moment the floor falls out from under our common sense. The second we place a detector at those slits, the moment we try to watch which path the electron takes, the wave of probability collapses, the interference pattern vanishes. The electron suddenly decides to be a solid particle in a single location. This is the observer effect, the proof that the act of looking actually changes the physical state of the universe. It suggests that at the most fundamental level, reality is not fixed or absolute. When no one is looking, the universe exists in a state of pure, undefined potential, a shimmering ghost of a reality that refuses to be pinned down. This brings us to the radical framework of biocentrism. Most of us are taught that life is an accidental byproduct of a vast, indifferent universe, that we are tiny sparks that briefly flicker in a pre-existing dark. But biocentrism flips the script. It suggests that space and time are not external containers, but tools of the mind, biological operating systems that we use to organize our sensory input. In this view, reality is not something you are in. Reality is something you are doing. Just as a movie requires a projector to exist on the screen, the universe requires the observer to collapse the infinite wave functions of probability into a single, coherent narrative. If the observer is the architect of the reality they inhabit, then the concept of nothingness after death becomes a logical impossibility. Because nothingness is, by definition, the absence of an observer, and without an observer, there is no nothingness to be experienced. But if you cannot experience nothingness, then what happens when the biology of the brain begins to fail? This is where physics gives us an answer that is far more terrifying than simple erasure. It is the theory of quantum immortality. To understand it, we have to look at the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, the idea that the wave function never truly collapses. Instead of the universe choosing one outcome, every possible outcome happens in a different branching branch of reality. When you measure the cat in the box, the universe splits. In one branch, the cat is dead. In another, the cat is alive. Both are equally real. Both universes exist. Now, apply this to the perspective of the observer, the inside view of your own consciousness. If your life is a series of branching paths, there will inevitably be branches where you die. In one branch, a car swerves a second too late. In another, a heart valve fails. In a third, the cells of your body simply stop their rhythmic dance against entropy. But here is the trap. You cannot inhabit a branch where you are dead. You can only experience the versions of reality where your consciousness remains integrated. This means that from your first-person perspective, your consciousness will always find itself in the branch where you survived, no matter how improbable that survival becomes. You might experience a near miss or a miraculous recovery, unaware that in a million other parallel branches, you have already ceased to exist. This is the last moment paradox made manifest. As we've established, the ending of experience is structurally invisible from the inside. You have fallen asleep thousands of times, yet you have never experienced the moment of falling asleep because the onset of sleep is the suspension of the very consciousness required to witness it. Death, according to this quantum logic, is the same. Because you can never experience the moment of non-experience, your timeline is forced to continue. From your perspective, you are a localized event in an infinite spreading cosmos, a point of view that is mathematically locked into existence. You don't die, you just decohere in everyone else's branch, while your own branch continues to stretch forward into an increasingly strange and isolated future. The terror of quantum immortality is not that you die, but that you might be unable to stop existing. It suggests a universe where you are a static sculpture in a block universe, but one that is constantly being funneled into the only surviving coordinates left in the manifold. It implies an infinite continuation without control, a timeless existence where you are forced to witness your own world line grow longer and thinner as the probability of your survival approaches zero, yet never actually touches it. You are a feature of the universe's geometry, and because the universe lacks a delete function, the observer is essentially trapped in their own perspective. Think back to that cold glass window on a quiet evening. You feel the solidity of the glass because your electrons are pushing back against the electrons of the window, a microscopic shield holding the void at bay. But biocentrism tells us that the glass, the window, and the evening are all part of a shared hallucination that your mind has constructed to make sense of the quantum fog. If the observer is the one who collapses the wave function of the starlight into a flickering point of beauty, then the observer's grave is always empty. The information of your life is not just preserved in the informational scar tissue of the vacuum. It is the very thing that is currently defining what the vacuum is. We treat death as the ultimate exit, the one way out of the block universe prison. But if physics is right about the conservation of information and the nature of the observer, there is no exit. You are an indelible feature of the cosmos, a trajectory in a high-dimensional state space that the universe refuses to erase. When people ask what happens after we die, they are looking for a story of disappearance or a story of continuation. But physics gives us a story of transformation without end, a transformation where the inside view is structurally prevented from witnessing its own conclusion. The terrifying truth of the observer effect is that you are not just a passenger in the universe. You are its necessary witness. You are the pattern that integrated the constituents into a unified experiencing system. And because that pattern is the only thing that can define now, you are eternally present in that now. You will die in the branches of your loved ones. They will mourn the final slice of your world line, the moment where your information becomes scrambled and distributed into the environment. But from your perspective, there is no final slice. There is only the stubbornly persistent illusion of the flow, carrying you deeper into a manifold that has no command for your deletion. The universe doesn't have a shredder, it only has a library, and you are a book that is being written in real time, across infinite pages, in a library that has no closing hour. You are the observer who can never truly leave the theater, watching a performance that only exists because you are there to see it. Imagine for a moment that you are walking through an empty house. The rooms are silent, the floors are bare, and to your eyes, the air between the walls is nothing but a hollow void. You feel alone in that space, a singular point of consciousness moving through a container of nothing. But if the holographic principle is correct, and it is one of the most rigorously defended ideas in modern theoretical physics, then that emptiness is the greatest deception of all. Physics whispers a truth that is both haunting and profound. You are not in the room. You are a projection of a record that is written on the very walls of the universe itself. We have spent our lives fearing the void of death, but what if the vacuum isn't a hole into which you vanish, but a perfect encryption system that has been recording every millisecond of your existence with absolute fidelity? Tonight, we dive into the mystery of the ghost in the vacuum, the idea that your identity is not a fleeting spark, but a structurally indelible physical record etched forever into the fabric of space. To understand why you can never truly be deleted, we have to look at the strange way the universe stores its data. In our daily lives, we assume that information is proportional to the volume of an object. If you want to know how much data a library can hold, you look at how much 3D space is on the shelves. But in the 1990s, physicists like Leonard Susskind and Gerard 't Hooft discovered something that shattered this intuition. They realized that the information content of a region of space is not proportional to its volume, but to its surface area. This is the core of the holographic principle, the idea that all the 3D information of the interior is actually encoded on a 2D boundary that surrounds it. Think of a 3D hologram on a flat credit card. The image looks like it has depth and volume, but the actual data is stored on the 2D surface. This means the universe has a backup system. Every interaction you have ever had, the way you felt when you first looked at the stars, the specific electrical fire of your deepest secret, the physical movement of your hand through the air, is not just a temporary event in 3D space. It is structurally indelible. It is being written onto the boundary of the universe in a way that space-time cannot erase. You are a 4D world line, a static sculpture in the block universe, but you are also a physical record on the cosmic horizon. When you die, your biological process stops and your pattern dissolves, but the record of that pattern remains. The ghost of your identity is not a spirit in a mystical sense. It is a literal physical record in the fabric of reality that the laws of physics are forbidden to destroy. We treat the vacuum as nothingness, but in the language of quantum mechanics, the vacuum is a perfect encryption system. Unitarity, the master law of the quantum world, demands that the total information of the universe must be preserved. Information can be scrambled, it can be redistributed, and it can be hidden in the subtle quantum correlations of the vacuum, but it can never, ever be deleted. If a black hole, the most efficient shredder in the cosmos, cannot delete the information of a book thrown into its maw, then the universe cannot delete the information of your life. Instead, you undergo a process of total, irreversible entanglement with the environment. You don't go anywhere. You simply become so deeply encrypted into the background noise of the vacuum that no human technology can currently read you. This is the identity gap in its most physical form. The data of your existence is preserved perfectly on the boundary of the universe, but the integration, the specific architecture of the brain that allowed you to experience that data as a self, is what stops. You are like a symphony that has finished its last note. The vibrations are still there, moving through the air, encoded in the molecular movements of the room forever. The ghost is the vibration. The death is the silence of the listener. The universe is a library with an infinite number of shelves, and it has meticulously archived every bit of you in the quantum state of the universe. The horror and the awe comes from the realization that you are indelible. You are a scar on the geometry of the vacuum. Every moment of your life is a permanent coordinate in a 4D manifold that refuses to let a single bit of information be lost. We spend our lives running from the end, but physics tells us that gone is not a physics word. You will die, and the structure that maintained your consciousness will disintegrate, but the information about that structure is conserved, scrambled, and preserved in the fabric of reality. You are a feature of the universe's geometry, a timeless structure that is already finished but eternally present. The vacuum isn't where you disappear. It is the archive where your ghost, your physical record, is stored until the end of time. You are a broadcast that will continue to drift through the dark long after the stars have gone cold. The terrifying truth is not that we are temporary, but that we are permanent. The universe lacks a delete command, which means that the you who lived, loved, and feared is a permanent geometric feature of the cosmos. We are the information the universe refuses to lose, a smeared identity that began with a first breath and will never find a final deletion. In the timeless structure of space-time, your life is eternal, not as a continuation of experience, but as a static structure that the universe is structurally incapable of letting go. We have spent this journey looking at the ledger of the universe, tracking the conservation of your information and the static geometry of your life within the block universe. But now, we have to turn the lens inward, away from the third-person description of physics and toward the only perspective that actually matters to you, the internal experience of the final second. There is a strange logical problem lurking at the very edge of our mortality, a glitch in the code of consciousness that we call the last moment paradox. Most of us imagine death as a cliff. We see ourselves approaching the edge, feeling the wind of the void, and then, at one precise and terrifying moment, we step off into the dark. We imagine the experience of the fall and the sudden violent transition into nothingness. But if you look at the structural requirements for witnessing an event, you discover that this cliff is a mathematical and experiential illusion. From the outside, a doctor can call a time of death. They can watch the heart stop and the brain waves flatten. But from the inside, from the only viewpoint you will ever inhabit, the ending is functionally invisible. You cannot experience your own end for the same reason you cannot see the back of your own head without a mirror. The act of witnessing requires the very process that is supposedly ending. This is the invisible ending. To understand it, we have to address the hard problem we touched on earlier, the gap between the physical state of the brain and the first-person phenomenology of being alive. Physics models the external description. It tracks the movement of atoms, the decay of neural coherence, and the rise of entropy. It can tell us exactly when a system crosses an operational threshold where it can no longer maintain itself. But physics has no variable for what it is like to be that system. There is no term in any equation that marks the point where experience stops. And because experience is a prerequisite for any report of reality, the precise point at which experience becomes non-experience cannot be witnessed from within. You cannot know from within experience that a moment is the last one, because to know that it was the end, you would have to exist in a moment after to reflect on the fact that it stopped. But by definition, in death, there is no moment after. Think about the sheer logical weight of that. If you survive beyond the last moment to acknowledge it was the end, then it wasn't the last moment. If you do not survive beyond it, then the ending never occurred in your timeline of experiences. This is not just a play on words, it is a structural consequence of how consciousness interacts with time. It creates what we might call a Zeno's paradox of the mind. Just as the Greek philosopher Zeno argued that an arrow can never reach its target because it must first travel half the distance, and then half of that remaining distance forever, your consciousness, from its own perspective, can never reach the state of non-existence. To reach it, it would have to experience the transition. But the transition to non-existence is the suspension of the very machinery required to record the transition. We actually have a perfect, everyday proxy for this phenomenon: the act of falling asleep. You have fallen asleep thousands of times in your life. You have laid in the dark, felt the weight of your eyelids, and watched the world begin to blur. But you have never, not even once, experienced the actual moment of falling asleep. You have been awake, and then you have been asleep, but there is no memory of the bridge between the two. Why? Because memory requires a conscious brain to record the data, and the moment of sleep onset is precisely the moment at which the recording mechanism is suspended. The transition is structurally invisible. You only know you fell asleep because you wake up later and see the gap in the clock. Death is structurally identical to falling asleep, with one terrifying difference. There is no waking up to verify that the gap occurred. From the inside view, the last moment simply stretches out because there is no subsequent experience to truncate it. Recent research into the dying brain has added a haunting layer to this paradox. We used to think that death was a simple fading away, a gradual dimming of the lights. But we now know that in the seconds and minutes following clinical death, after the heart has stopped and the blood has ceased to flow, the brain often experiences a massive, coordinated surge of electrical activity. This isn't the random firing of a braking machine. It is a highly organized burst of neural coherence. Some researchers suggest this is the brain's final trick, a massive hallucination or a rapid-fire review of every bit of information stored in the long-term memory. But when you combine this biological reality with the physics of time dilation, you encounter the mathematical asymptote. If time is relative, and our perception of its flow is a product of our neural processing speed, what happens when that processing speed spikes while the external clock of the body is slowing down? From the outside, the doctor sees a 30-second surge before the brain goes dark. But from the inside, if the brain's internal clock is accelerating, that 30-second surge could subjectively dilate. As the brain's coherence breaks down and its ability to distinguish now from then dissolves, the last second of life might feel like it is stretching toward a mathematical infinity. Like a pilot falling into a black hole who appears to an outside observer to slow down and freeze at the event horizon, your consciousness might experience its own event horizon, a final, timeless now that never technically reaches the zero of non-existence. This is the true horror of the last moment paradox. The possibility that death isn't a state of nothingness that you enter, but a boundary you can never actually cross. We spend our lives dreading the void, imagining a state of eternal blackness. But physics tells us that nothingness is not a substance. It isn't a place you go. It is the absence of perspective. And from a first-person viewpoint, the absence of perspective is indistinguishable from the state you were in before you were born. Do you remember the billions of years that passed before your birth? Was it dark? Was it lonely? Was it cold? No, it wasn't anything, because there was no you to register the passage of time. This means that death is not blackness or eternal sleep. It is the total removal of the coordinate system. If there is no perception of time, then the gap between your last breath and the heat death of the universe, or the reassembly of your atoms in a Poincaré recurrence trillions of years from now, is subjectively zero. If you could somehow be reconstructed in a distant future, from your perspective, you would die in one room and wake up in another with no intervening time, much like a patient under anesthesia. But if you are never reconstructed, the last moment remains the final static coordinate of your existence in the block universe. It is a page that is never turned. We are narrative-generating machines. We need beginnings, middles, and endings to make sense of reality. But the universe is a continuous physical process that doesn't care about our need for a full stop. When we say someone died at 2:47 a.m., we are imposing a category on a transformation that physics sees as perfectly continuous. The atoms that were you at 2:46 are still there at 2:48. The energy is conserved. The information is scrambled but preserved in the quantum state. The only thing that has changed is the inside view's ability to report on its own status. The last moment paradox suggests that the ending we fear is a phantom of the outside view. We see the deaths of others and we project that cessation onto ourselves. But your own death is the one event in the universe you are uniquely disqualified from witnessing. You can experience the approach. You can feel the fading of the senses and the narrowing of the world. But the arrival is a logical impossibility. Like the horizon that recedes the closer you sail toward it, the end of the self is a limit that consciousness can never actually reach. You are a story that, from the author's perspective, has no last sentence. You simply are, until the very machinery of being is no longer there to ask the question. In this light, the terrifying truth is not that you will reach an end. It is that the end is an invisible ending, a transition into a state that physics cannot describe because physics requires an observer, and you are the observer who has finally become the observation. You don't go into the dark. The dark is what the outside world calls the space where your coordinates ended. From the inside, there is only the world line, the static sculpture in the loaf of bread, which is eternally present, eternally real, and eternally finished. You will die, but you will never know you are dead, because knowing is a property of the living. You are a localized event in an infinite cosmos, and that event, your life, is a permanent, indelible record that the universe is structurally incapable of deleting, even if you are no longer there to read the file. We have reached the edge of the known, the final horizon where the clinical language of the laboratory must finally reconcile with the ancient, shivering reality of being human. To find the real answer that physics gives to the mystery of death, we have to travel back past the hospitals, past the graveyards, and even past the birth of the stars to the very first infinitesimal fraction of a second of the universe's existence. In that unimaginably hot, dense, and chaotic inferno, a colossal cosmic conflict was unfolding, an ancient war between matter and its shadowy twin, antimatter. According to the beautiful symmetry of our fundamental equations, the Big Bang should have produced exactly equal amounts of both, which would have led to an immediate, total annihilation that left the universe as nothing but a sea of fading, silent light. But something went wrong. A tiny, magnificent flaw in the symmetry occurred, where for every billion particles of antimatter, there were 1,000,000,001 particles of matter. You, the chair you are sitting on, the oceans, and the stars are the ashes of that ancient war. The tiny, singular fraction of remaining matter that survived the greatest destruction the universe has ever known. Our very existence is a beautiful imperfection, a leftover remainder in a universe that was just flawed enough to allow us to be here to ask these questions. This origin story sets the stage for the most profound technical truth in all of science. The universe you inhabit is a system that transforms, not a system that erases. We spend our lives terrified of a delete function that simply does not exist in the code of the cosmos. If you were to write out the equations governing every known force and field, from Newtonian mechanics to the most complex quantum field theories, you would search every symbol and every variable in vain for an operator that performs ontological deletion, the act of removing something from the inventory of reality. Physics tracks trajectories, it models the evolution of wave functions, and it measures the drift of entropy, but it never describes something stopping existing. When we say a star has died, or a human has ceased to be, we are using a folk model of reality that the fundamental laws do not recognize. In the eyes of the universe, you are a localized thickening of information and energy, and while that organization may disperse, the universe has no command for your erasure. The terror of death is, at its heart, a misunderstanding of what it means to be a thing in a physical universe. We think of ourselves as solid objects with clear boundaries, but physics whispers that you are actually a process, a flowing, shifting configuration of matter and energy that maintains a recognizable pattern. Think of a flame. It looks like a solid object you can point to, but it is actually a dynamic event of combustion that is constantly consuming new fuel and releasing new heat. The atoms that make up the flame at this second are not the same atoms that made it up a second ago, and yet the flame remains. You are that flame, an island of low entropy in a sea of increasing disorder, borrowing atoms from the earth and the stars, and then returning them to the void. Death is not a switch being flipped to off, but the relaxation of the microscopic shield that held your empty space together, a moment when the process of you stops being actively maintained and begins to redistribute. This redistribution is governed by the law of unitarity, the absolute rule of cosmic memory, which states that the universe never forgets a single bit of information. For decades, the greatest minds in physics fought a black hole war to determine if even the most violent crushers in the cosmos could delete the data of a falling object. The conclusion was a victory for permanence. Information is never lost. It is only scrambled and encrypted into the environment. If a black hole, which defies almost every other law of physics, cannot perform the operation of delete, then the simple biological decomposition of a brain certainly cannot. Your first kiss, your final thought, and the unique arrangement of every neuron in your head are currently being smeared across the vacuum of space, encoded into the subtle quantum correlations of the universe. You are not a fleeting spark. You are a structural, indelible scar on the geometry of the vacuum that the laws of nature are forbidden to destroy. This permanence is made geometrically explicit in the framework of the block universe. Einstein's relativity tells us that time is not a river carrying us toward a waterfall of non-existence, but a fourth dimension that coexists with space in a static, four-dimensional manifold. In this picture, the universe is like a loaf of bread, and every moment of your life is a permanent slice of that loaf that exists eternally. Your birth is a point on a world line, and your death is another point on that same line. Neither is more or less real than the other. The now you are experiencing right now is not a special, moving target, but simply a coordinate in a structure that contains every second you will ever live. When we reach the final slice of our trajectory, the structure of our life is complete, but it is not erased. The end of a road does not unmake the miles you traveled to reach it, and the final page of a book does not cause the earlier chapters to vanish into a void. This brings us to the stubbornly persistent illusion that Albert Einstein wrote about just weeks before his own death. He was grieving the loss of his oldest friend, Michel Besso, and he used the strict language of physics to tell Besso's family that the distinction between past, present, and future is nothing more than a trick played on our consciousness. Einstein wasn't offering a spiritual platitude. He was stating a technical fact of the universe he had spent his life mapping. Besso was not gone. He was simply located differently in the structure. The feeling of time flowing, the sense of the past receding, and the fear of an approaching end are features of our internal, inside view, not features of the external reality. We are four-dimensional sculptures embedded in an eternal loaf of space-time, and the nothingness we fear at the end of the world line is an operation the hardware of the cosmos literally cannot execute. The terrifying part of this truth is the realization that the universe refuses to let you go. We spend our lives looking for an exit, imagining that when the lights go out, we will be granted the mercy of total deletion. But physics tells us that there is no command for erasure. You are an indelible record in a system that lacks a shredder. You are a feature of the universe's geometry, a permanent broadcast radiating into the dark, and a static sculpture that will be present in the manifold long after the last star has gone cold. The void is not a place you go, and nothingness is not a substance you can inhabit. They are narratives produced by minds that cannot yet understand their own permanence. From the perspective of the physics, the invisible ending of your experience is merely a coordinate boundary in a structure that is timelessly real. So, what is the real answer physics gives? It tells us that you are a highly organized, temporary, and miraculously beautiful arrangement of immortal stardust. It tells us that while the inside view of your consciousness might eventually become structurally invisible to itself, the record of your existence is physically and mathematically preserved forever. You are the information the universe refuses to lose, a smeared identity woven into the very fabric of reality. The universe does not have a delete function because it is a perfect bookkeeper, and you are one of its most complex and irreplaceable entries. The final thought the equations offer is one of radical, clinical permanence. You will die, and you will always have lived. The end of your trajectory through time is not the destruction of your existence, but the completion of a geometric object. Your life is not a fleeting spark that vanishes into a dark room. It is a permanent, expanding flash of light that the universe can never pull back. The distinction between the living and the dead, the past and the present, and the beginning and the end is a stubbornly persistent illusion that helps us navigate our world, but fails to describe our reality. In the timeless architecture of space-time, you are already there, and you will always be there. A coordinate in a frozen river, a page in a book that is never closed, and a survivor of an ancient war who found a way to witness the infinite. The universe transforms, it redistributes, and it rearranges, but it does not and cannot delete. You are here, and in the language of physics, here is forever.